Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're immersing ourselves, really getting into the source material around a book that critics are already calling, well, essential for this year, Charlotte McConaghy's Wild, Dark Shore. So our mission today is pretty straightforward. Quickly unpack why this book getting early nods from places like Amazon editors, The
Yeah.
Guardian, why it's hitting such a nerve right now. We want to get you the key insights from the early takes, the reviews, the excerpts we've got, the shortcut to understanding the buzz.
And it's a really crucial moment for McConaughey, actually, because this material, it doesn't just show us a standalone novel. It's more like it defines the final piece of what people are calling her eco-trilogy of empathy.
Ah,
Yeah. So if you look at Wild Dark Shore alongside Migrations, and once there were wolves, you start to see this whole complex map taking shape. It kind of charts that tricky territory between, deep loss and this almost stubborn kind of hope.
that's a great way to frame it. So let's pin down the book's core identity then. Published February 2025, Flatiron Books. And the sources we have, they keep highlighting the setting, don't they? It's this
Absolutely.
deliberate move away from, cities, screens, all the noise. And the central idea seems to be, across the board, that nature acts like a mirror, reflecting what's broken and beautiful inside us.
Exactly. And that idea, I think that's why the praise is so strong. It's not just, oh, it's a good story.
Mm.
It feels necessary. The Guardian, for instance, they really went for it, calling it a haunting lyrical meditation on love, guilt, and the violence we do to the world and to ourselves.
Wow.
Yeah. And seeing it as the end of the trilogy really underscores that she's not just telling one story.
Yeah.
She's kind of concluding this huge artistic statement about extinction, about survival.
Okay, so if the trilogy is this big statement, what actually happens in this specific book? What's the core story you follow as a reader?
Right. So at its heart, it's a mystery, but it's like deeply felt, driven by trauma and grief.
Hmm.
We follow the main character, Edie. She's a marine biologist,
Okay.
and she returns to this really remote, kind of isolated coastal village. And the reason she's back is tragic, really. Her sister disappeared during a research trip nearby.
Yeah.
So the novel then is basically structured around Edie trying to piece together these fragments of her sister's life, what she left behind.
Hmm.
And doing that forces Edie to confront her own past. These really painful, unresolved questions about motherhood, forgiveness, where she truly belongs.
That sounds like a really powerful emotional core, but going back to the setting you mentioned, the sea, it sounds like it's almost a third main character here.
Oh, completely.
It's described as more than just a backdrop. It's like alive, breathing, unpredictable, dangerous, and alive with memory. That phrase keeps coming up.
Yes. And that fusion setting and character, that's kind of the magic McConaughey pulls off here. She's absolutely blending genres, which is, I think, why the sources are so taken with it. You've got the pulse of a real missing person mystery layered right on top of this environmental drama, and then it's all wrapped up in this deep emotional reflection.
But wait a sec, mystery, environmentalism, and deep introspection, doesn't that risk feeling a bit cluttered? How does she pull that off without losing the story?
Well, that's the interesting part. She seems to use the environment itself. It's like visceral elemental power as the glue. The New York Times description really nails it, I think. They called the book devastatingly beautiful, a book that aches with longing and truth. You see? The ocean's memory, that's the longing. The environmental decay, maybe that's the ache.
Yeah.
And Edie's search for her sister becomes the truth she has to face. So the sources suggest the genres don't clash. They actually reinforce that central feeling of being overwhelmed by nature, both inside and out.
Okay, that makes sense. The language itself holds it together. So let's move past the setup and really dig into those four big themes the sources keep highlighting. Let's start with the first one, nature as mirror.
Right. This is where I think the emotional weight really begins. The ocean, it's explicitly written as conscious,
Yeah.
as breathing, even mourning. It's presented almost like a character itself.
Not just a symbol then.
No, much more active than that. And this is important because it avoids being too simplistic, just personification. The reviews show that the actual physical storms, the harshness outside Edie's window, it's meant to directly echo the turmoil she's carrying inside, the devastation within.
So the landscape isn't just sitting there, it's part of the emotional drama. Okay.
Yeah.
Which leads us right into theme two, grief and connection. The sources say the book is just saturated with grief. Obviously, the lost sister, yeah. But also this bigger, more universal grief, right? For a dying planet, for losing that sense of safety in a world that's changing so fast environmentally. But here's the thing. The sources insist it's not despairing. that it focuses on how love can somehow outlast ruin. Given the plot involves disappearance and decay, how does she actually manage that pivot away from despair without it feeling, well, unrealistic or maybe even a bit saccharine?
That's a really good question. I think she anchors that hope in resilience, but it mirrors the resilience she sees in the ecosystem itself.
Mm.
The love that outlasts ruin isn't necessarily a happy ending in the traditional sense. It's more about the persistence of connection, despite the loss.
Ah, okay.
The sources suggest the characters find that their commitment to actually caring for the environment, caring for memory, caring for each other, that becomes the antidote to the grief that could otherwise paralyze them. It's a painful kind of hope, maybe, but it's rooted in action, in witnessing.
That's a key difference. And that connects directly to theme 3, which is how she handles climate anxiety as an emotional reality. The sources use this phrase, inherited wound. What exactly do they mean by calling climate change an inherited wound rather than, say, a political issue or just data?
It means the book deliberately shifts the focus away from policy debates or statistics and puts it squarely on personal, visceral experience. The inherited wound is that pain passed down to Edie's generation, this burden of knowing what's already been lost and knowing more loss is coming. McConaghy seems to avoid the usual kind of activism or preaching you might expect. Instead, she focuses intensely on the really intimate human act of witnessing that loss, feeling the ache of losing what we love right now in the present. It's about the emotional weight, not just the scientific facts.
That reframing feels powerful. It kind of gives the reader permission to feel the crisis without demanding the story itself offer some immediate fix.
And then finally, running through all her work, apparently, is theme 4, female resilience. Exactly. Yeah, just like in Migrations and Wolves, this book centers on women who have to confront these huge wildernesses, both internal and external. The reviews suggest the narrative shows Edie and, through her memories, her sister grappling with trauma.
But not just victims of it.
No, not just victims. It's about transforming that trauma, or maybe the search that comes from the trauma, into a kind of defining purpose. They become active navigators of the chaos around them.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit and talk about the craft itself, because the writing style is clearly a huge part of this book's impact. It's described as really tactile-like. You can feel the salt, the wind, the cold rain.
Yes.
Cinematic, but also intimate. One reviewer even said, every sentence breathes.
And that breathing quality, that's why critics are using this term slow literature for it. Kirkus Reviews summed it up beautifully, I thought. They said, McConaghy captures the wild as both sanctuary and reckoning. Her sentences are waves, her silence is depths.
Sentences are waves, silence is depths.
Yeah, it implies the pacing is very deliberate. If you try to rush through it, you're going to miss that fundamental rhythm the author is creating.
Okay, let's dive a bit deeper into that idea, though. Slow literature. What does that actually feel like when you're reading? Structurally, how are the sentences waves you have to ride rather than just, text on a page?
Well, it's about the focus. It prioritizes the internal landscape, the sensory details, over just pushing the plot forward quickly. The sentences themselves often use really rich description, focusing on compound imagery like the specific way light hits the water, the texture of a coming storm.
Right.
It almost forces you, the reader, to slow down, because the meaning isn't just in what happens, but how it feels, how it looks, how it sounds. And when Kirkus mentions silence as depths, they're talking about those narrative pauses, right? Those moments of introspection where the plot deliberately stops for a beat so the emotional reality can sink in. You have to kind of feel the full weight of Edie's grief before the story continues.
That intense focus on feeling. It means the emotional impact must be pretty unique. It sounds deeply personal, like the grief isn't abstract, it's embodied, like that cold seawater you mentioned.
Exactly.
And in a time when we're all feeling a bit of maybe environmental fatigue, the sources suggest McConaghy uses awe, not just fear or dread, to remind us why we should still care.
It feels like a necessary intervention, doesn't it, in the whole climate discussion. By making the ocean almost a character and making the grief so tangible, she invites empathy. It makes you, the reader, feel like a witness, not just a distant observer reading statistics.
Now, okay, in the spirit of covering all angles, we have to touch on the critiques, because no book this ambitious comes without some potential downsides for certain readers. The sources do note the pacing can feel uneven, that sometimes the deep dives into emotion might overshadow the plot momentum, especially if you're coming to it expecting, say, a fast-paced mystery. And this seems crucial. The resolution to the sisters' disappearance, which is the main plot hook, right? It's described as quiet, maybe even elusive, not some big dramatic reveal. Doesn't that risk, fundamentally, failing the promise of that genre blend? If you set up a mystery, shouldn't you solve it satisfyingly?
That's a totally fair point, and yeah, the critique is valid if you walk in expecting a straightforward procedural ending. But the counterargument from some critics is also pretty compelling, and I think it speaks to the book's whole purpose. Woodpage argued its power lies not in resolution, but in recognition that life, like the ocean, never stops moving.
Ah, okay, so the journey, not the destination.
Kind of. The disappearance becomes less about finding out exactly what happened and more about how Edie learns to live with the not knowing, with the uncertainty. The emotional resolution, her coming to terms with it, that's the real point, more so than the factual one.
That clarifies the author's intent really well. And that intent, I think, is just perfectly captured in that powerful passage they excerpted in our sources. McConaghy writes, I thought the ocean would heal me. Instead, it taught me to listen to the pulse beneath everything, the wild, dark heartbeat of the world that refuses to die.
That sentence,
Yeah.
it feels like the thesis statement for the whole trilogy, doesn't it?
Mhm.
It completely reframes what healing means in a world that feels broken.
Mhm.
Healing isn't about erasing the pain or getting back to some perfect state. It's about learning to coexist with the suffering while still recognizing that persistent, undeniable force of life and beauty that just refuses to be stamped out.
So if we bring this back to where we are now, in 2025, this book feels absolutely vital because it seems to provide the language we need for the emotional side of the climate crisis. In a world just flooded with data, facts, political arguments, McConaughey seems to pivot the whole conversation towards empathy, towards vulnerability.
Yeah, she basically asks, how do we keep caring? How do we hold on to awe when it feels like everything's falling apart? And her answer seems to be by forcing us to slow down and truly see the beauty and the wildness that is still here, still fighting.
So, okay, bottom line from our deep dive. Wild Dark Shore comes highly recommended, but you need to go in knowing this is immersion, right? Not escapism. It's a book that breathes with you. It'll feel slow at times, definitely tender, probably devastating, but ultimately it reads like a hymn to resilience.
Definitely.
If you're someone who got lost in the deep themes of, say, the overstory, or felt the raw emotion and where the crawdads sing, this is very likely going to be your next big immersive read.
And maybe that leaves you, the listener, with one final thought to chew on, something building on McConaughey's vision. If she suggests that embracing the quiet is radical within a story, what does it actually mean for you to slow down, to try and listen to that pulse beneath everything in your own, probably frantic, overstimulated life, especially when the world keeps demanding speed, demanding action right now? Maybe that recognition, that listening, is the first real step toward change.
Subscribe to the Timeless Tales podcast. Your stories, your time.